Before we move on to those other big fields that contributed to our understanding, I want to look at a little bit more on natural selection itself. So you saw the power of artificial selection. I want to talk about another topic to show you the power of natural selection. So even more fantastic than those fancy pigeons is what the real world can do. And one of the things that really exhibits the power of natural selection is something that's called mimicry. And we'll talk about different kinds of mimicry, and there's lots of different kinds, and lots of them have different names that are descriptive of what's going on. We'll talk about a few of those. A few are worth learning. But the point here is we're looking at organisms that exhibit or represent this particular phenomenon, but keep in mind all the time these things got that way through natural selection. And if you can look at these things, you can kind of understand how they got that way, and in doing so, it helps you understand how natural selection works, which is one of our goals in the early part of this class. So this is a product of natural selection, and you've probably heard of different kinds of mimicry, and some of this might be old hat for you, but it's also worth spending some time and really getting. Now, if we look at mimicry complexes, they all have three things. They all consist of a model. So we're going to talk about mimicry complexes in general before we look at different kinds of mimicries. They all include a model, and this is some object or organism that has some protective or beneficial characteristic. And then we have another player that's the mimic, and this is individuals or entire species of organisms that derive protection or benefit from mimicking the model. So we've got this thing that has some characteristic that's either it protects it or it's beneficial for it. And then we have organisms that pretend to be that other thing, and in doing so, they get the same protective characteristic or they derive the same benefit. Okay? There's one more piece of the puzzle missing. What's missing? So there's something with a beneficial characteristic. There is some organism that pretends to be that other thing that has the beneficial characteristic, and by pretending to be that, it gets that beneficial characteristic. It gets that payoff. What's the third piece of the puzzle? You over there in the red shirt.
A predator usually? Or selective predators?
In more general terms, it's the thing that's being fooled. We've got something here. We've got something that's tricking, it's pretending to be something else, but it's pretending to be something else for the benefit of something else. And that's the third party. That's the dupe, or that's the organism that's being fooled. And yes, Dylan's right in many of the examples that we'll talk about, the benefit that you get is to not get killed by some predator. So in those cases, the thing that's being fooled is the predator. It's being tricked into not preying on this thing that is the mimic because it's pretending to be the model. Okay? We okay with that so far? Okay, so let's talk about some kinds. some kinds of mimicry. One of them, and these kinds of mimicry really are defined by the players here in this three-part system. So one kind of mimicry is called crypsis. What is that about? What does it mean to be cryptic? You ever see that movie, The Predator? It's like, that guy's like, oh. But he kind of disappears, right? He's cryptic. What's he doing?
Does this have to do with blending with the environment?
Yeah, that's, somebody else said it here. That's also, I usually write this word because I always misspell this one. Good enough? You don't like it. How do I fix it? There's a U somewhere? All right. Takes care of that. Yeah, so crypsis is camouflage, and that's defined by the model. Okay, so in crypsis, the model is some inanimate object. Now, if you're an inanimate object, can you be something that's alive?
No.
Yeah, you can. Okay, really look at the word. Is a leaf an inanimate object? Is it alive? Yeah, so it'd be things like a stick, a rock, leaf, stuff like that. The point here, it's not some other animal, but it could be some part of some animal. But the model pretends to be this inanimate object, and in doing so derives some benefit. One of the benefits you would derive from doing that is if there are things that don't eat rocks, but they eat you, or some moth, if you look like a rock and the predator thinks you're a rock and it doesn't eat rocks, then it doesn't eat you. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Is it like those bugs that look like leaves?
It's very much. It's exactly bugs that look like leaves. What are some kinds of bugs or insects that look like leaves? Well, there's some walking sticks don't look like sticks, but that's exactly what's going on with walking sticks also. They look like sticks. They're mimicking inanimate stick objects, but some of them look like leaves, and so we call them walking leaves, and they really look like leaves. I mean, really look like leaves. Same thing with katydids, okay? Right now, this time of year, when you go and leave here, is the sun down? No, it's still up. But if you hang around school a little while longer tonight, when the sun goes down, when you walk to the parking lot, you'll hear, there's actually a few kinds of katydids up in the trees on campus, and you can hear them singing. If you got one in your hand, it would be easy to see, but they look just like leaves with 6 legs. But up in the trees, they're very hard to see. When we look at pictures of this stuff, maybe not today, but on Wednesday, I'll show you lots of, I like pigeons, I like katydids, so you get to see lots of pictures of katydids too. And you'll see that amongst other leaves, they're really hard to tell them apart. Yeah. Now sometimes things do crypsis not to avoid predation, but to be a better predator. Something that you might call aggressive mimicry. Can anybody think of an example of that?
Chameleons?
Yeah, that's probably driven more by avoiding predation, but because their prey tends to not think of them as some big thing that it's a lizard or it's part of a plant. But it would also work that way, so I'm okay with that. He's talking about a chameleon, and they're very plant-like. They're very plant-like lizards, and there are other lizards that are very plant-like. It allows them to escape recognition by visually oriented predators, but it also can allow them to be better predators, because things that wouldn't walk up to a lizard would walk up to a clump of leaves, and then you're gone. You're like, what the? That's about all you can remember. Yeah.
Snakes and spiders?
Some snakes, yeah. Some snakes. I was collecting some beetles in Central America once, and they were on this branch of this tree, and it was broken, so there was sap coming out of it. So I caught the beetles that were on there, but I figured some more would come back. So I stood there, and I just standing there like this. you know, just kind of waiting and looking around and stuff. And all the time, there was a boa constrictor. I measured it, 9 feet long. It was right there the whole time, but it was on leaves. I'll show you a picture of a boa constrictor on a pile of leaves. You can't see it. I was there for 15, 20 minutes, and then it moved just a little bit, and then it makes your eyes look, and then your eyes see a pile of leaves, and then once the movement happens, your brain says, snake, right? And then when I see snake, I do 2 things. I wet my pants, because I don't see rattlesnake, or king snake, or gopher snake. I see snake, right? And our brains, that's an old, we'll talk about Homo sapiens character, that's an old thing that's stuck in our brains. And I could just take a rubber snake and throw it in here, and a bunch of you guys, even you guys, will jump on your chairs and scream like little girls. Or big girls, yeah. Yeah, we don't tend not to like. Now, once you see them and you calm down, you can identify the snake and see if it's something worth picking up or something. But the point being is that thing is a great predator. So monkeys will come right up to that pile of leaves. They literally won't know what hit them. And a human, you can stand there for a long time. You don't see it, and it just moves a little bit, and then your brain builds the picture real fast that says snake. And when we look at pictures on Wednesday, we'll see a bunch of examples of those kinds of things. People do that, right? Do we do this kind of thing?
Yeah, Army.
Yeah, who does that? Oh, yeah, the Army and stuff, they do that for both reasons, to avoid getting shot and to be able to sneak up on somebody else if you're gonna shoot them. Yeah. So if you end up in a war in a sandy desert, and then they got a great deal on green leafy camouflage, and you're running around there looking like some bush. That doesn't work, right? So they have, and there are camo outfits they're broken up. It's not just one solid color, right? So by having it broken up into a pattern, it makes it hard to actually recognize an outline. But then they have those desert ones, so the people that are, like the Marines and stuff that are fighting in Afghanistan, they wear those gray ones. They're gray kind of camouflage outfits. Anybody here gone duck hunting before? Do you wear like a big red party dress and a blue hat and turn on the radio real loud? You can. Could you do that if you went duck hunting? Sure. How well would you do? Not so good. Yeah, so to hunt ducks, what do? Well, you can wear camouflage. You can also build a duck blind. It's just a bunch of bushes and stuff that you hide in. And then you throw these things out in the water. What are they? Fake ducks. Plastic ducks. Okay, what are they? Mimicking real ducks. And then you blow on a fake duck call. It's all mimicry to get ducks that are flying by to look down and go, hey, that looks like a good place. Look at all those other ducks down there. And you want them to get close enough so that you could shoot them. We're doing the same thing. That's exactly what's going on. That's an aggressive mimicry example. Okay? But that's crypsis. And again, the key here is the mimic is pretending to be something that's an inanimate object. It may be a living thing like a green leaf, but if you're on brown plants, not all plants are green, okay, then if you're the only green leaf on the brown bush, you kind of stick out. So we have things that mimic dead bushes, dead sticks and things like that. So most of the walking sticks that you might be familiar with, they mimic brown sticks, not so much green ones. There's a species of katydid in Los Angeles called Scuderia mexicana, and almost all of them are green, but some of them are brown. So just like we saw those beetles came in lots of color varieties, this one comes in 2 color morphs. And it's enough that there are enough dead leaves and brown plants around here that you can have that 2 color morphs exist. They're the same species, they can mate with each other, but those brown ones still derive enough protection by being brown that the alleles that code for brown katydids also exist. Most of them are green, but some of them are brown. I've collected both kinds in in my yard, but very few of the brown ones. Also, if you're going to mimic a leaf, you've got to do what else?
Sit still.
Yeah, you got to behave like a leaf, right? So if it's a really calm day and the whole bush, nothing's moving, and you're walking all over the place, you know, it's just like that snake, you know, something's gonna like take a double take. It's like, what's up with that? Oh, that's not a leaf. It's the only one walking around. Okay, but sometimes the leaves are moving around, and there are a bunch of these walking sticks and katydids and chameleons and things like that that mimic leaves. They behave like leaves too, and so instead of walking down a branch like this, they walk down branches like this. They sway, and they look more like, they're behaving like leaves, okay? They have genes, they have alleles that code for doing that. Other variants have alleles that code for doing this, okay? Apparently, the alleles that code for doing this end up in individuals that get picked off more than individuals that code for doing this, and so what gets perpetuated? This behavior that's coded for the genes that codes for that characteristic. All you need to do is tip the scales in the slightest amount, and those alleles and those combinations will get perpetuated at the expense of other ones. And when we look at katydids, things that are mimicking leaves, again, it's easy to picture how it got that way. Leaves have been around for a lot longer than katydids, but you've got herbivorous insects on plants feeding on those plants. Are they all the same? No, the individuals are all different. If some of them, even in the slightest amount, look at all like part of the vegetation, and because of that, they on average, even the slightest amount, reproduce differentially more than ones that don't look so much like leaves, you're going to perpetuate the leaf-like behavior, the leaf-like looking combinations of alleles. But not just over one generation, over the next generation. And then the next generation, what happens? That species creates and dumps a whole new variety of individuals out there. Some of them which look even more like leaves or behave more like leaves. So every generation you're dumping these variants out there. And nature, if there's a selective force there, and predation can be a very strong selective force, that selective force is selecting for things that look more and more like leaves. And then it just goes nuts, and you'll see the products of that when we look at our pictures on Wednesday. And some of you can't believe that that really is an organism and not a leaf or something like that, and yet it is that organism. Okay? So that's crypsis. Another kind of mimicry is called Batesian mimicry. And this was figured out by Henry Walter Bates, who we mentioned in class already. Can anybody remember in what context we mentioned him? Very briefly, though.
Isn't he friends with Wallace?
Oh, yeah, good job. Yeah, you should move up in class and move over closer to the center. Yeah, he spent 11 years in Amazonia collecting insects, doing natural history, doing research. He went home, and he never went back again, like Darwin, and he wrote a couple of books. One of them's one of the greatest natural history books called A Naturalist on the River Amazons. And then he also wrote about the organisms that he saw. And I think he said he would rather go back and spend 11 years in the Amazon than write another book. You know, it wasn't his thing. But yeah, so he was there, and Wallace was there at the same time. And I remember Wallace went home earlier, and his boat sank and all that stuff. But Bates noticed something. So he's collecting insects. Again, he's experiencing a lot of things. And one of the things he's recognizing is there are some groups of butterflies that birds, the most prominent visually oriented predators around, now there's a bunch of these butterflies that birds don't eat, okay? But then there are also these other butterflies, and then he figures out that they're noxious, they're unpalatable. So your palate, okay, things that are unpalatable, they're nasty, they taste bad, they make you sick, and if you eat them, you don't eat them again if you live to remember it. So there are these butterflies that are poisonous and they're noxious, they're unpalatable, but then there are other butterflies that live in the same place, and if you get them in your fingers and look at them close, you can see that they're different, but they are really more similar than they are different. And you can go to some places in the Amazon and you can collect a dozen butterflies and you think they're all the same until you get them home and you pin them and you look at them and they can be all different. But they're very similar. And so some of them taste bad and they're not eaten by predators. And then there are others that are okay to eat and yet they look so much like these ones that are bad to eat. So, so he described this situation, and here what we have is the model is, just in really crude language, we'll say something unpalatable, or we could even, it's just bad, okay? It has some characteristic that makes it bad and you don't want to deal with it. And then the important thing here is the mimic is actually okay, but mimics the bad thing. Another important thing here is that this is another organism, it's another animal. When we're talking about these butterflies, we're talking about model butterflies and mimic butterflies. And not really individuals within a species. These are all the individuals of one species are doing one thing, all the individuals of another species are doing something else. Actually, the real classic textbook example of Batesian mimicry involves two butterflies, and one of them is a butterfly that's all over campus. What's that? Yeah, the monarch. That's one of the we don't have a national insect yet, but that would be probably the best candidate for a national insect of the United States. That's the monarch. And it's a big butterfly. It's about that big. There are lots of bigger butterflies in the world, but for North America it's pretty big. And it's orange. So this butterflies, they have 4 wings. They're completely clear wings, but they have little hairs. But instead of being long and skinny hairs, they're short, flat hairs like roofing tiles all over the wings, and those roofing tiles come in different colors. That's where the colors of butterfly and moth wings come from. So most of the scales on their wings are red, and then they have black scales that typically run along the veins and along the margin of the wings. And so these are big orange and black butterflies. Are they trying to do this? No. They're not trying to hide from predators. In fact, they're boldly proclaiming to the world, hey everybody, look at me. I don't want you to mistake me for something that's okay to eat. I want everybody to see me. And these colors say, leave me alone. And they're telling the truth, okay? There's a whole family, or a whole genus of plants, genus Asclepias. These are the milkweeds. Some species grow around here, and they grow in other parts of the United States. And they produce some noxious chemicals, a whole host of noxious chemicals, but one of them are these chemicals called cardiac glycosides. And if vertebrates eat them, they get sick. And most insects, they can't eat them. Why do these milkweed plants make these nasty chemicals? Yeah. If you could talk to them, this class we do a lot of talking to things that can't talk, but if you could talk to them, do they want to be eaten by insects? No, they don't. And so plants have come up with all kinds of insecticides, all kinds of chemicals. Caffeine is one of them, okay? That's an insecticide that plants made to keep from being eaten by insects. Well, these plants have come up with really ingenious ways of not being eaten by insects. But remember, those insects are out there, they're eating plants, and every generation they're dumping out variants that are different from the previous generation. If some of those can kind of deal with those plant defenses, what a great resource. Nobody else can eat this. It's like the Vaughns in your neighborhood. Nobody can go in, but you find a way in. And so all of that stuff is yours. So there is a strong selective pressure then to crack those defenses. And a few insects have cracked the defenses of milkweeds. So if you plant milkweeds in your yard, wait a few months, those insects will show up. They're very predictable what you will get on milkweed plants. There's a dozen things around here that will be on it, and they can only eat that. So those are the defenses that they can deal with. They can't deal with caffeine. So if you grow tobacco or if you grow potatoes and stuff like that, they can't deal with that. They can deal with this though. But that resource is now theirs, and they're very successful at it. And there's different ways of dealing with these nasty chemicals. What the monarchs do as caterpillars is they sequester those chemicals. They don't metabolize them. They don't change them into something else. They kind of eat them, and then they put them away. They keep them in their body, but they put them away so that they don't hurt their metabolism, but they stay in there. Such that if you ate one of the caterpillars, you eat these nasty chemicals, and you get sick. Even when the caterpillar becomes mature and pupates and then emerges as an adult monarch and flies around, it still has those chemicals in it. So a visually oriented predator has experience eating one of those. If it survives, it remembers big orange and black butterfly made me sick. They talk like robots. It made me sick. I'm never eating one of those things again. Okay? So now these monarchs are flying around, and things aren't eating them because the predators have learned not to eat them. Well, there are other butterflies, and in this example, there's another butterfly called the viceroy. I'll show you pictures of these on Wednesday. And at first glance, it looks just like a monarch. Now, if you studied it a little closer, you'll see, oh, it has some really big differences. They're actually not super closely related butterflies either. But it looks enough like a butterfly that these visually oriented predators that have learned to avoid monarchs, big red and black butterflies, leave them alone. It also does that to these viceroys. Even though you could catch them, bite off the body. You don't eat the wings when you're eating butterflies and moths. You bite off the body and you eat it, it wouldn't make you sick. But they don't know that. Okay? So this is the Batesian model. It's really bad. This is the Batesian mimic. It's really good, but it's mimicking something that's bad. Everybody get that? Again, you have this thing out here, you have these, and at the same time, both of these populations are dumping out variants. Okay? And all you have to do is be a variant that derives the slightest reproductive and survival advantage to pass on the genes that codes for that advantage. And that advantage will get perpetuated phenotypically and genetically, genotypically, okay? In real life, this situation is more complicated than that because not all butterflies all monarchs are noxious, and depending on what they eat, some of these are kind of nasty and bad, but you get the point, right? So, but they're reinforcing kind of each other's situation. Also, this kind of color pattern has a name. It's what's called an aposematic coloration. This has to do with going away from, and this has to do with a mark. So it's like a mark that makes things go away. So this is warning coloration. And the most common warning colorations are combinations of orange and black, yellow and black, red and black. Anybody got any examples from your experience of something that's aposematically colored? What? Said what? Yeah, they're not really tree frogs, but they're these things called poison arrow or poison dart frogs. I'll show you a picture one on Wednesday, and they are very brightly colored. And they hop around on the leaves of the forest floor, and they don't try to hide. They're just out there for you to see, and they're doing just what that butter. They're saying, look, don't mistake me for something else. I want everybody to see me, leave me alone. And they're telling the truth. Because like if you want to eat weird stuff, don't eat frogs and toads. You can eat frogs, but you got to take the skin off, because that's where they make some really nasty chemicals. And these make some very, very deadly poisonous chemicals, so much so that the Native Americans in South America put those things on the end of sharpened wooden sticks and blow them through a blowgun into vertebrates, and they stop, I think their heart stops beating and they stop breathing and they die. and then you get something to eat. But those, if you pick up those frogs and want to eat them, that you can die from doing that. So that's a good example of a postsomatic coloration. They're yellow and black, orange and black, blue and black. They're very brightly colored, and they want to be seen. Okay, they're not. The strategy to avoid predators here is to not be seen in the first place. The strategy here is to make sure you're seen and you get your message across. Okay? What's any other examples that you could think of?
Snakes, like king snakes?
Yeah, and actually that's an example of, so that's an example of this. Okay, so we have some snakes in this country that are very apostomatically colored and they're venomous. Okay? Venomous is different than poisonous. So if you want to have fun with your friends and you're on a hike and you see a rattlesnake and he says, "Oh, is that poisonous?" You go, "No." And then he picks it up and it bites him, and then he goes to the hospital and he loses his arm, and you go, "Ah, ha, 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 ha. It's venomous, not poisonous." Yeah. And then he hates you the rest of your life because you're like a turd about words, but I like words. They have meaning, yeah. Poisonous means you can't eat it. You can eat rattlesnakes, no problem. They're venomous, so they have a system for administering some venom, and those are their fangs. So there's venomous snakes that are apostomatically colored in North America that are coral snakes. And then there are these other snakes that are also apostomatically colored that are king snakes, and they are not venomous, and they're deriving protection by mimicking these things that are apostomatically colored. Also in this apostomatic coloration, or any of these things, do you have to be perfect?
No.
You just got to be what?
Good enough.
Good enough. So those king snakes that mimic the coral snakes, are they exactly like the coral snakes? They're good enough though. And there's a little rhyme. How does it go? It's red, touch, yellow, kill. There's bands on the snake. There's red, yellow, and black. So it's red, touch, yellow, kill a fellow. Red, touch, black, a friend of Jack. Okay? It only works in North America. So if you take your one-armed friend, down to Colombia, and he's like, "Oh man, I'm getting over it. I forgive you for that." And then you go, "Oh look, there's a snake," and you do the nursery rhyme, and he picks it up, and now it bites this arm, and now he loses this one. It's like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you that nursery rhyme only works in North America," but it's good enough. It's a different pattern. It's a different sequence of the color bands, but it's good enough for to trick the dupe. Okay. Things like, what color are yellow jackets and wasps and hornets?
Yeah, and black.
And black, yeah, it's the same thing. Are they telling the truth? Oh yeah. What happens when you eat a yellow jacket? Yeah, you get your tongues all swollen, and then you'll never eat one again. Yeah. And so we'll see there's lots of things that are totally innocuous. You could literally get a bucket and eat them with a spoon. It would do nothing to you. But they look just like hornets. They look just like yellow jackets. They look like bees. They're great examples of Batesian mimicry. Okay? Let's see. There's another kind.
Quick question.
Yes.
So if they're not eating the monarch, and by them mimicking, they're not eating the
Right.
viceroy, what happens when their population gets too big then? Since they're not being eaten.
Well, their populations are limited by other things. It's not always predators, so that's kind of like a top-down control on a population, but then there are bottom-up controls by how much food resources and stuff like that. But you bring up an interesting point, and I got rid of it, but we can go bad, good. But you can do some mathematical modeling. Your textbook talks about what modeling things is, and it's describing mathematically natural situations that you can screw around with the numbers and see how the other numbers react and learn things about the natural world. And so you could imagine if you have both of these things, what if almost all of them are this and there's a few of these? Most of the experience that the predators have would be with good things. They don't learn to avoid orange and black butterflies, and so they'll make mistakes on these, right? So it would make sense, and when you go out in nature, this is what you find mostly more of these than these. Also, these things also have to be in the what? They gotta be in the same place, right? So, can the monarch live in Texas and the viceroy live in Alaska, and then these things will derive benefit from looking like this? It actually can, and there are cases where that's the case. How can that be? If the model and the mimic are in different places, how can one derive protection by looking like something else because it has taught the predators to leave them alone? How can that be? And yet it is.
Convergent evolution?
Oh, you're using big fancy words. That's for December and November. But you're right, that's kind of what's going on. But no, that's not what's going on here. But that is true. No, that is true on these color patterns. That's really an example of convergent evolution. Multiple lineages independently coming up with the same thing. So you're all right there. But in the brain of an individual bird that migrates between Texas and Alaska, it really is something in the same place. So they learn something in one place and it's applied somewhere else. There's real examples of that. So you see this pattern, doesn't make any sense, it shouldn't be that way until you understand what the players are doing. So they actually learn things about the model in one place and then it's applied to mimics in another place. 5 more minutes, 4 more minutes. The other kind of mimicry that I want to talk about is called Eulerian mimicry. And this was figured out also in butterflies, also by an explorer to Amazonia named Fritz Müller. And here, the model is bad, just like in Batesian mimicry. But the mimic is also bad. What's going on here? Well, it's really, this thing is bad and this thing is mimicking this, but also this thing is bad, so in effect this thing is also mimicking, they're mimicking each other. Okay? So what's going on here and why would that happen? You got to put your natural history brain on. Why would natural selection. Why would natural selection make that happen as opposed to each bad thing coming up with its own signal to say I'm bad?
Double protection?
Well, what do you mean by that? I think you're onto something.
I mean, like, either way, the dupe is screwed because they're both bad. I mean, he's not going to eat it.
Okay,
at all.
but remember how we gave viruses to different populations of people that were monogamous or very promiscuous, and we let it play out, and we could predict what the virus would become. The same thing here. Let's have a bunch of different things that all use the same signal to say they're bad, and then you have another situation where you have a bunch of different things and they're all bad, but they all use a different signal. And you let both of those play out. Which scenario do you think would perpetuate itself and keep existing? Well, the answer is right there. Using the same or very few signals to say you're bad. Natural selection is going to reinforce using the same signal. What happens to any variant that goes out on its own, like white and blue polka dots? Okay? Bad or not, that thing is outside the norm, and that thing's going to get preyed upon, even if it kills or makes its predators sick, and it's going to drive it toward something that's very similar. That makes sense? Keep thinking about these things. They need to make sense to understand how natural selection works. Also, another thing about this aposematic coloration of red and black, orange and black, and yellow and black, that works really good in the daytime. It doesn't work at night. Is there a aposematic coloration at night? There is. It's black and white. So we have a little mammal that's in all of your backyards that's black and white, and it's aposematically colored. It's a skunk. Is it lying or telling the truth? Oh, it's telling the truth. Yeah. So leave black and white things alone. What's another black and white colored thing that's telling the truth and leave it alone? The Los Angeles Police Department. Well, you think it's funny, but what color are our police cars? Are they trying to hide? No, that's a post-somatic coloration and it works at night because you can see contrasting white and black. You can't see colors at night. Okay? So leave them alone too. All right, we'll see you on Wednesday and we'll look at some pictures to reinforce this.